And so what's happening right now for everything?
So
before
we
get into
are writing songs, basically, with a view to making an 8th album.
Crikey.
It's apparently that people want that. And which is, quite a privilege, really. And then we're doing festivals and bits and bobs throughout the rest of the year.
Amazing.
There's only so much I can tell you.
Mountainhead, what an album, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
And the show, I saw you at Stockport Plaza.
Yeah, so
where the last time I think I saw Ken Dodd there as
Did
well.
you?
So it's
Oh man,
it was
I
even
wish I
better
had.
than Ken Dodd, which was
I'm not
amazing.
sure about that. Is anything? Yeah, I was a big fan of Ken Dodd. The Plaza show was the first time that we'd attempted to play about 10 of those songs, and we played a few old bits and bobs at the end of the show as well, but it felt quite tentative. Yeah. And I think a seated venue sort of suited that in a way, because we couldn't expect people to jam to stuff that they had never heard before, really. And because we were really quite, tentative, nervy, playing all that material for the first time. Beautiful room for it. And because we'd made the album and the one before, actually, mostly in Stockport, and we've got our own rehearsal room down the road as well, when it's not underwater or on fire. That was the other problem.
One would
so it sort of felt appropriate to sort of launch the campaign in Stockport.
Yeah.
Because obviously we're nominally a Manchester band, but we've done a lot of time in Stockport, and John lives there now. So
it was a room full of friends, wasn't it? So it was friends and fans. So it
and you and Jay Taylor were like those two Muppets. Walder and Statler and Waldorf.
I was saying Mulder and Scully, but that's not right. Who were the two
This is
Muppets
intolerable.
that used to sit on? That's the one.
That's it. Thank you.
We were definitely.
I saw you up in the gods, like. Yeah, it was great.
It's interesting saying, I always think of you as a band from Manchester rather than a Manchester band, which I think's interesting because
That's interesting. I'd say the other way around, if anything.
Yeah, because there was a period of music, and we touched on it earlier, that because we were talking about Claxons and Touettes, and there was a certain period, but there was a certain period in Manchester as well where there was a lot of quite what I would term sort of cerebral indie, I suppose, and kind of a reaction against Manchester sort of stuff a little bit.
I think it was more a reaction against the way it was eulogized, because the music itself and a lot of how it was released was fantastic and futuristic and had the right attitudes, I think. And then it slowly curdles into something that becomes nostalgic and restrictive. And that was the thing that we were slightly bored of by then, having been students and lived here for about 4 or 5 years at that point.
Yeah. So 17 years, 18 years this year, is it?
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Get us for murder.
And and you've been consistently, to keep it up consistently over 7 albums is quite impressive. Yeah,
I that is something I'm proud of, I think, is that when you look at the catalogue as a whole and the career as a whole that we've had, I would like to think sort of relatively high quality output. And actually it helps me when we're in the depths of and the conflict very often of making any one chorus, song, album. It can help to just sort of pull out and look at the thing as a whole and think, we don't really have to live or die by every beat of every bar anymore, because we're just adding an increasingly smaller percentage each time to the whole. And when I look at because I don't always personally, and none of us do, I'm sure, think that we've got absolutely everything right. Because a collaborative career, it's impossible to feel that way. But when you look at the whole, I think that's something I'm really proud of. Any sense of legacy, I think, is a real privilege to have now.
Is there a certain number of albums you get past where you stop feeling like you need to meet an expectation, or?
I think the expectation's still there from ourselves, if nothing else. Like we'd never want to phone it in or half-ass. And we really pore over every decision and what goes on the record, what doesn't go on the record, where it goes on the record, when it comes out, all that stuff. Everybody takes everything very seriously, and so we that can be obstructive. Yeah. But it means that at least we've thought about everything. Very little passes
I listened to it again the other day, and it's weirdly sort of, there's something quite prescient about it, considering what's happening in the world right now.
What, Mountainhead?
Yeah. It's got
I
a
mean,
feeling
I suppose it's
of,
a year old now, isn't it? Or nearly. Yeah, and actually, if you look at all of our records, I think that there's been a degree of that. Get to Heaven, especially, I think was maybe when we best captured the coming, well, the next 10 years, really, everything between then and now. Yeah. The rise of the charlatan. And here we are. What more do I need to say?
And because the last album had such a strong concept, I want to say concept.
Yeah,
I think like a concept album, but it did have a, it had a story. You knew what it was about.
And I think in terms of overarching concept, it's the strongest, or at least the most. It's the one that's imposed itself most on the music, I think, on that record. So I think we've probably taken that approach as far as we can or should go. Yeah. It was the most sort of fantasy fiction record we've made, I think, for better or for worse. But having said that, we're all quite insistent that the music has to work in its own right. You don't need to read The Lord of the Rings to understand it. You know, it's got to move people in every sense of the word, without needing to use your brain. Just your heart and your feet have got to work independently.
No, I thought, because I read about the album before I heard it, last one, I was like, thank God it's got good songs.
Yeah.
Because
we've all had that experience when you read a lot about an artist or an album, and then the music just doesn't bear it out. There are quite a lot of artists that get written about more than listened to, I think.